If you guys played endgame PvE in previous seasons, you know that Stasis was surprisingly the best subclass overall for damage. It makes zero sense at first glance, but using the old Supreme Wellmaker mod with something like Reed's Regret and Font of Might meant that you were getting an extra 25% damage for free. With the update to the mod system in Lightfall, Font of Might is completely gone, and its replacement is Weapon Surges. These are a mod that go on your boots, which can be stacked up to 3 times in total to give you up to a 22% increase in damage for any particular weapon type. These exist for kinetic, strand, and stasis weapons, along with void, solar, and arc weapons, which covers everything you could run. This season, we also have 2 artifact mods that are going to be useful for increasing your weapon damage as well. Void Weapon Channeling is first, and it's going to provide an increasing damage bonus for your Void weapons only for the more Void abilities that you have up whenever we get a kill, which, as we will cover, will basically be broken for any players on Void subclasses. And then Prismatic Transfer will be more useful in a team damage setting against bosses, because this mod is going to increase all weapon damage across the board for teammates when casting your super, as long as your teammates are on different subclass types. In this video, I'm going to be covering everything that stacks together with all of these mods, along with the best ways to use them, and then obviously the values that each provides. As always, if this video does help you out in any way, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated, and I will also be streaming my team's Day 1 clear this Friday, so make sure to drop a follow on my Twitch if you're interested in watching someone live. Starting off with Weapon Surges, these are the best mod currently in the game for damage. You need to be running this on day 1, otherwise you're kind of throwing. Also, I did test against Carl here. I know he isn't a boss, but for the purpose of this video, since we aren't comparing any weapons, it's completely fine. At base, you can see that we are hitting for 3,398 damage. With ×1 for Void Weapon Surge, this jumps up to 3,738, which is a 10% increase. ×2 hits for 3,738, which is a 17% increase in damage. And then lastly, ×3 is a 22% increase, where we're hitting for 4,146 damage in total. Then testing Weapon Surges with Empowering Rift, which is a 20% buff, and Weaken, which is a 15% debuff, you can see our damage jumps up now to 5,721 per shot, which means that Weapon Surge does indeed stack with buffs and debuffs in the game. So this makes it very similar to Font of Might, which most people refer to as a weapon amplifier. That being said, the meta right now, and presumably in the new raid, is going to be swapping with Izanagi's Burden and Hothead, or just any other rocket that has autoloading any solid damage perk that you might have. These are obviously different surge damage types, so what surges should you run to optimize your damage? Well, the difference between ×2 and ×3 stacks for surge is going to be 5%, since 22% at ×3 is 5% more than 17% at ×2. The difference between ×0, or having no surge, and then ×1 is obviously 10% using the same logic. So basically, if your rocket deals over double the damage of Izzy, then increasing its damage by 5%, even though it's a smaller buff, is going to be better. And if it's not over double the damage that Izzy deals, then you should have on 2 surge for your rocket and 1 surge for Izzy. I tested last season with the updated Lightfall damage numbers, and in the case of Izanagi's Burden versus Hothead when using Wolfpack rounds, it's almost dead even. Running ×1 for Izzy and ×2 for Hothead is technically better when using base reserves, but at base reserves, the difference here is less than 1%. So basically, if you whiff Izzy shots a lot, then run ×3 surge for your rocket. If you're running double rocket reserves, then run ×3 as well for your rocket. However, Wolfpack rounds are somewhat unreliable. So I would say in the case that you are consistent at damage, running ×2 on your rocket and ×1 on Izzy is going to come out better if Wolfpack rounds end up not hitting. Moving on to Void Weapon Channeling, this is basically just a singular mod version of Weapon Surges. For each ability that we have up, we're going to see that we had an increased damage value for our Void weapons, which lines up perfectly with Weapon Surge values. At base, we hit for 4,494 damage. ×1 ability is going to be our ×1 damage boost at 4,944, which is a 10% increase. ×2 is 5,258, which is a 17% increase. ×3 is then 5,483 at 22%. On top of this, there is also a ×4 value when you have your supercharged, which is 25% more damage for void weapons after getting a kill at 5,618 damage. Testing this with a buff and debuff with the ×3 value, we also see that we hit for 7,566 damage, which does line up perfectly with the buff and debuff we were using. So Void Weapon Channeling is going to be great as an alternative for Void Weapon Surge. This will be great for players who are on Void, especially in the new raid, as you get a pretty solid roaming damage boost that also stacks with everything you would typically be using. However, you definitely don't want to use this over weapon surges in a damage phase. This is more of a roaming surge that you have as an option to use. Lastly, as you're going to see here, running Prismatic Transfer is just a 20% buff. We hit for 4,494 at base once again. Then with the buff from Prismatic and a teammate casting their super, my damage goes up 20% to 5,393. Then hopping into the bubble, Weapons of Light is going to kick in, which overrides the Prismatic buff. So clearly this will not stack with other buffs. It will still stack with surges and debuffs, obviously, but you're probably going to want a larger buff, which is better anyways. That said, since High Energy Fire is gone, this might be one of the best buffs to roam with that we currently have. It's only 10 seconds, so Weapons of Light will work super well too, but this is probably a bit easier to use by just staggering your supers. That is pretty much it for everything we have this season. I wanted to make something to the point with some testing shown so that you guys can see how everything works while also explaining what you should be using. Anyways, that's all for this video. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.